Hey everybody, welcome back. Chris Quinones here from Rasayana with day 3 of Beat the Heat, the anti-inflammation boot camp challenge, or boot camp. Not really a challenge, but a boot camp. A real quick hit this week about Ayurveda and its view of chronic inflammation and how we address it and which areas of our home and health we should really be zeroing in on. Yeah. A little tongue-tied today. In your life, yesterday we talked about the gut and how improper food combining leads to chronic inflammation and that buildup of toxicity. I talked a bit about our exposure in our food and environment to heavy metals and mold and a lot of other substances due to our current agriculture methods, and what to replace your smoothies with so that you could get optimal health of your tissues and not be disturbing the gut and digestive process. So be sure to check out the replay of session 2 if you missed that last night. And tonight we're going to move on to the other brain in the body, which is the mind, and sleep, and how sleep, being one of the 3 major pillars in health according to Ayurveda, is so elusive to us right now, and what the repercussions of that is, and why being a night owl is really no bueno. Okay. Now, when I talked in session 1 about the large umbrella of autoimmune diseases and the growing list of diagnoses that fall under it, for the mind, we often refer to the neurodegenerative processes and diagnosis like Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's even. Ayurveda, in even integrative medicine, would refer to this as a disease of the brain. Diabetes of the brain is what integrative medicine often refer to these conditions as our addiction to sugar and our body's inability to burn fat for fuel and instead be burning sugar is really causing a bit of issues in the mind. So tonight I want to give you some Ayurvedic context now that you've started learning about the vocabulary of Ayurveda, and talk about the impact of stress on the mind and how you can use some specific tools I'll give you today that you can implement straight away to help manage the anxiety, the fear, and the stress that we're feeling now, every day, really, but especially now in these times. And be able for your nervous system to have some immediate tools to downshift and get to sleep by 10 p.m., which is what Ayurveda recommends in that rhythmic living approach. So I'm going to share my screen with you here and talk a little bit about the context, the Ayurvedic context for the mind and how the mind becomes inflamed as a result of stress and what are we going to do about it. So bear with me a moment while I go ahead and get my iPad squared away. It's hard for me to lecture and pull this up on my iPad at the same time, so bear with me. I can't seem to pull it up ahead of time and not have it on the big screen. So like I was saying, yesterday I talked about the gut and the Maha, Vatta, Shrota, as it's referred to in Ayurvedic medicine, the great carrying channel, right? Because nourishment is another major pillar in Ayurveda in terms of health and longevity. Sleep is the second. And for the mind, we refer to this as manos, or the manovahashrota, the channel of the mind, which really has its origin, ironically, in the heart space, according to yoga and Ayurveda, that the mind really is or the brain is an organ, but the mind is something a bit more complex, and the mind reflects consciousness, and consciousness has its root in our hearts, not in the brains and minds. And so Ayurveda looks to different layers of healing in the mind. We've got the layer, I'll say the spiritual layer, the spiritual layer is Atma. Oops. Here, right at the top, let me go ahead and, which means the soul, right? Ayurveda is the system of living naturally. It's the art of living rhythmically, and it's about uniting the soul with the mind and the body. And so we've got this spiritual layer. We've got a more subtle layer here, and I'm going to talk about the approaches to each of these layers in a moment. And then we have the gross level of healing. And these are the kind of different layers, if you will, to approach healing. You might remember in session 1, I said that the approach to healing can be either top down or bottom up. So people can approach their healing process with a practitioner, and depending on the issue at hand and the history of that person, maybe they already have some experience with mind-body practices, the practitioner can work with them to come from the subtle realm in this top-down approach to healing, which is the favorite approach in Ayurvedic medicine, that the subtle is always available to us, right? That the subtle is always free. You don't have to go anywhere to find it. You don't have to buy anything to use it. And it is limitless, right? It's in Akasha, it's in space. It's just has no boundaries. It's absolutely limitless. It's the space where ideas come from and creation itself. So the subtle is the primary approach of healing for the practitioner, but you can also do the bottom-up approach and come from the physical tissues in the body, where the practitioner will work with habits and nourishment and body work treatments to address the tissues, the sense organs in the body, their action, their objectives, and the 5 elements that make up the doshas. And when we're experiencing stress, which is not managed well, then we have this chatter of the mind. And the very first Yoga Sutra in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras of the Ashtanga Yoga system says, Yoga Chitta Nirodha, which means that the first lesson in yoga is calming or ceasing the fluctuations of the mind. That's what chitta is. It's the chatter box of the mind. And when we aren't in sync with our sleep cycles, with our eating and fasting cycles, and when we choose to move and exercise, then we get out of that circadian rhythm that our bodies are designed to handle. And as a result, the disease process begins. And with regard to how yogis look at the mind, consciousness as it manifests from the creation of the universe down to our daily human lives, breaks down this funnel. And so for chitta, when we go further into Samkhya philosophy, which is where yoga and Ayurveda come from, it talks about the mind dividing into these 2 different aspects, where we've got the buddhi. Let me see if I can use a different color here. I'm playing with my new iPad here. The buddhi is the part of the mind that is responsible for discernment, the decision making, right? And ahamkar is when the mind starts to, or when consciousness is kind of starts to differentiate, when the ego begins to form and identify the existence as separate than that of the environment. It's the I factor. And manas is the it's like the television set, if you will. It's what one of my teachers, Dr. Chahan, said. It's the projector, right? It's the TV that reflects and projects to our conscious minds what chitta is chattering on about. Yeah. And so when we're able to implement these kinds of daily habits and practices that I teach in my coaching programs and work with my clients with, you're able to slow down that chatter and be able to start to practice a good bedtime and evening routine. Now, why does that matter? It matters because so many of the body's processes for repairing the tissue and releasing certain hormones like melatonin and human growth hormone at night when the sun has set. You know, these are critical processes that don't occur if we're staying up at night looking at our screens and getting that light wave to the eye and brain that we just weren't designed to be taking in at that time. And it confuses the mind, it confuses the body into thinking it's daytime. And as a result, that detoxification process that happens during Pitta time from 10 and 2, where the liver and gallbladder and gut are doing its detox and repair, that process is not happening if you're not asleep by 10 p.m. Okay. And the yogis say that if you can get to bed, any hours that you sleep before 10 p.m. are worth double in its value. Yeah. And when we are able to have adequate rest, have truly rejuvenative sleep, I mean, you know it, right? You know when you wake up in the morning after a great night of sleep, whether it's 8 hours or 7 hours, and you just slept soundly and solid, and you wake up feeling alert and grounded and rested, ready to start your day. That is a possibility. That is a reality that you can create for yourself. And even if you don't, if you're not feeling it right now and you're having trouble with insomnia and sleeping patterns, I feel you, and I can help. And we can work that bedtime routine backwards. But first, I want to talk about why it's important to go to sleep by 10 o'clock in terms of the buildup of plaque that occurs in the brain. We know now, modern science has shown us that we have these cells in the brain called glial cells, and that we actually have an entire system of drainage dedicated especially to the brain. We know of the lymphatic system in the body. We know of the digestive system and the circulatory system in the body, all systems that use and transport materials and waste and nutrients. But only recently, in the last couple of years, has scientists really discovered this system of glymphatic cells and a glymphatic system in our brains, where that beta amyloid plaque that is a byproduct of poor digestion and chronic inflammation in the gut and the body's inability to digest these complex proteins that are found and are a byproduct of our highly processed food. This plaque builds up in the brain over time. And when we're sleeping is when the brain is actually draining that plaque. In fact, Dr. John Douillard says that each year we drain anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds of plaque from the brain every year. And how you can manage that, or rather how you can support that, I'll talk about tonight. Because the mind is where we're able to make our decisions. It's where we're able to imagine. We're able to control our senses, right? If we hear a sound that's too loud or frightening, we process that information in the mind and then use the action organ of our feet to move away from the sound, right? And so using these practices and habits of the yogis to clear the mind includes getting your ass to bed by 10 o'clock. I mean, there's just no way to be polite about it. It has to be prioritized. And we have to be able to stop eating early enough in the evening so that the body can digest that food and go to bed on an empty stomach so we can sleep. Now, the effect of stress on the mind affects people differently and affects each of the doshas and constitutions or mind-body types differently. Stress affects Vatta individuals, or if you have a Vatta imbalance, stress will often manifest as a very fearful, anxiety, sensations. You're very anxious, and insomnia often is a sign of a Vata imbalance and the effect of stress on the mind for Vata individuals. Forgetfulness is another. For your Pitta types or Pitta imbalances, stress tends to manifest in the form of heat, right? It has that sharp, penetrating quality that emotions like anger and jealousy and I would say resentment have. And also with our speech, that for the pittas, when they become stressed, tend to become very sharp with the tongue, very cutting. In fact, their words can burn bridges when they get out of control. So with Kapha individuals and Kapha imbalances, stress tends to manifest in the form of depression and heaviness and greed or possessiveness. It has that sticky quality to it, like mud, like earth and water, the elements that make Kapha dosha up. And so when there's an imbalance in these three forces, stress tends to manifest in those ways. Now, you can have symptoms from more than one category, and often we do. So what do we do about it? Well, we start to prioritize our sleep hygiene by working our bedtime routine backwards each week by 15-minute increments. That's what I recommend, because it's not realistic to try and jump in bed, at 9 o'clock if for the last several months or years you've been not really winding it down to like 11:30. So that means that you're pretty much done dinner by like 6:30 if you can, and at least 2 hours before bedtime to allow that digestion to occur. The hour before bedtime is the most critical. I call this the buffer zone. So the kinds of activities and the company that you keep and engage with are pretty particularly important during that hour, 90 minutes before bedtime. So start working your bedtime routine backwards in small increments, just 15 minutes, small baby steps each week until you can get to bed by 10 o'clock, lights out. Lights out. 10 p.m. Not just starting to brush your teeth at 10 o'clock or just signing off of Facebook at 10 o'clock, but actually lights out at 10 o'clock. That's your first step. And another step that I really like to use, and that has become a big part of my personal practice in managing stress and inflammation of the mind, is breathing exercises. And to the basic yogi, we call this pranayam. Pranayam actually is a lot more than just breathing exercises, but that's the oversimplified version for the beginners. Pranayam is actually a combination of techniques, and it's really about controlling intentionally and manipulating the direction of flow of life force energy. And breathing is just one way we do that. And there's a technique called alternate nostril breathing, or nadi shodhana. Nadi refers to a pathway in the body, an energetic pathway of the body. And shodhana is Sanskrit for balancing. So this technique is neither stimulating nor sedating. It will balance both of the opposing forces of Purusha and Prakriti, the archetype masculine and feminine energies that are responsible for the creation of the universe. It is a wonderful technique that I use to just calm the nervous system down or allow me a little bit of energizing if I'm feeling a bit lethargic. So what you do is, first step is blow your nose with some tissue. So just to clear out any mucus or anything that might be trapped in there. And if you've got a deviated septum or you're having some congestion right now, go ahead and know you can do this technique hands-free. I'm going to show you how to do it with your hands. And of course, being a subscriber, because you were good on you to register for this program, you'll also in the replays get that information as well. So know that we'll begin by first just sitting up nice and tall, extending the spine, and either planting your feet flat on the floor, or if you're listening to this seated on the floor, maybe cross-legged. And go ahead and just close your eyes and start to drop into your breath. And keeping the mouth closed, you're just going to start stretching out your inhales and inviting that breath all the way down to the belly as you let it relax and expand. And on the out breath, gently going to squeeze the belly button in, massaging the abdomen, and gently relax it as you inhale and invite the breath back down. And just first taking a minute to find this even balance between the in-breath and the out-breath. And as you drop into that rhythm, you're going to take your right hand and take Vishnu Mudra, folding down the index and middle fingers. And with your right thumb, you're going to close off the right nostril. Wherever you are in your breath cycle, collectively, we're going to exhale and empty the lungs. And inhale through the left nostril. Take your time. Close the left nostril with your ring or pinky finger and exhale out the right. Squeezing that belly in and emptying the lungs completely. Stay right here and inhale back through the right. Close it with the thumb and exhale out the left. Inhale left. Switch, exhale right. Inhale right. Switch, exhale left. Finding your own flow and pace. Going back and forth. One more round. And after you exhale out the left nostril, release the technique. And return back to your deep belly breath for a moment. Breathing through both nostrils and just observing. You may find that you are able to slow down a few notches just in that 3-minute practice of Nadi Shodhana. Like I said, you can do it hands-free if you are experiencing some mild congestion or have a deviated septum. You can simply visualize the breath entering and exiting the left or right nostril. It's a little bit more advanced technique, but still available to you. And it's a really wonderful way to help downshift that mind and bring balance to the subtle body and allow the mind to get some sleep, to fall asleep more quickly, to stay asleep, and also to fall back asleep if you're waking up in those wee hours of the morning, which is so common in Vatta imbalances, that the sleep is interrupted, not because of any physical needs like using the bathroom, but because of the mind, and that there's just simply too much lightness in the mind, and that it isn't rooted enough with the downward flow of life force energy, the apana vayu, as we say in yoga and Ayurveda. There's udana vayu, which flows up, and that allows us to have and experience enthusiasm and joy and be able to communicate and articulate our thoughts, feelings, ideas. And yet when it becomes excessive or not yet balanced with apana vayu, the downward flow, which helps keep us grounded and centered and stable and steady, then we have these insomnia patterns of waking up early and like really early, interrupted sleep. So Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breath, is a wonderful means to help balance the mind. I'll also add sometimes a drop of lavender essential oil on my inner wrist and rub them together and begin my belly breath with a nice deep inhale of the essential oil, which is known to balance all 3 doshas, lavender essential oil, and calm the mind. So you have to remember that, being able to drain the brain, to manage the sugar that we're intaking, really eliminate it if possible. But, I get it. There's sugar everywhere. I still eat sugar sometimes. But this buildup of plaque on the brain, this inability to manage our stress response, our lack of commitment to sleep and prioritizing deep rest is really what is going to continue to create these they are the risk factors for these neurodegenerative diseases that are so common and now classified within autoimmune disorders themselves. I'm talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, and that these processes are things that you can slow down, and integrative medicine would even argue that they're preventable, that these are not lifelong sentences if you can catch the diagnosis early enough, and if you can change and evolve your habits early enough to mitigate that buildup. So you can do seasonal cleanses as another option. Ayurveda usually recommends a seasonal cleanse with a mono diet of khichdi at least twice a year, or when the seasons change. I offer and lead a 21-day gut reset called Fire Starter The next one is in October if you're interested, but that's offered every October and usually April-ish in the springtime. That's a great way to reset the gut and in turn reset the brain, because we know now that so much of our mood is determined by the gut's ability to digest our food, right? That serotonin, most of our serotonin in the human body is produced in the gut. So if we're combining our foods wrong and we're not getting the sleep that allows the detoxifying of our choices, then we really are playing with fire. And even if you think you're a night owl, you're not. You're just not. The human body was not designed for us to be awake at night. We do not have night vision. We do not have a need to be hunting our prey and catching it and eating it at night, right? That's why our guts and the digestive capacity are not strong in the evening. They're strongest midday, at noon, at lunchtime, when the sun is bright and the fire within our own solar systems, our own souls, is also burning bright and strong. So Nadi Shodhana, working your bedtime backwards in 15-minute increments. Massaging the scalp is another great way to help balance this inflammation of the mind. Simple sesame seed oil will do in the cooler months, and coconut oil perhaps in the warmer months of the year. And just simply warming that oil, spreading it in your palms, and working it into the scalp vigorously, and really working in rows from front to back, much like a mohawk pattern, because the tracks for that lymphatic system drain in this pattern. So working from front to back is especially supportive for the drainage of that plaque in the brain, and for also kind of sealing in, if you will, sealing in the constant chatter of the mind, the thoughts that are constantly bouncing off, and really allowing a bit of a cap on that, literally and subtly. And then depending on which oil you're using, or if you're working with a practitioner, there are very specific herbs and formulas that are cooked into these oils and delivered into the body by massaging it through the skin. And Brahmi is a wonderful Ayurvedic herb for the brain and a wonderful tonic for the brain. So I know Banyan Botanicals is a great vendor for Ayurvedic products. I use them, and they have a great coconut Brahmi oil that I use during the summer and even now in the beginning of September, just to help cool down any excess heat that's accumulated. And it's not a practice that I do every day. I just practically can't get oil in my hair every day and work with clients and teach and look professional. So start somewhere. Start with at least once a week and massage oil in your scalp, warm oil in your scalp. And avoid doing it if you have a cold, if you're congested. We definitely don't want to add more heavy substance to the head when there's already congestion and mucus. So avoid it if that's the case for you. And generally, you're also going to avoid putting oil on the scalp if you're menstruating. This is to keep the mind cool when menstruation is a process for the body to emit heat. And so we definitely don't want to be adding a warm substance or a warming substance like oil to the head when the body is already naturally venting during menstruation. So those are the two caveats with scalp massage. And then I'd like to put a nice little shower cap or bandana or headscarf or wrap. I've got quite a collection. I should do a video on just head wraps. Go ahead and wrap your head. And even if you have no hair, if you're bald, you know, it's not about the hair. It's about the brain and about the mind. and energetically using the qualities of these substances, of oils, of herbs, of rhythmic living and going to sleep, of pranayama, to be able to give your mind, body, and soul really what it needs. So I hope that helps. I will, was there something else I was going to include? There might have been. Let me just check my notes here. I want to make sure I don't forget anything. Oh, yes. I wanted to give you another recipe for a sleep tonic. Last night, I gave you another recipe for sleep tonic. This is a second one. So grab your pens and write this down. It's very similar, I'll say. You're going to use 7 to 8 or so soaked and peeled almonds, a teaspoon of fennel seeds, 3 to 4 rose petals, if you've got them. I use organic rose hips because that's what I've got. A pinch of ground cinnamon, I'd say 2 cups of milk, ideally cow's milk. But again, if you're not doing dairy, nut milk is a great option. Almond milk, oat milk in particular. I like oat milk over almond milk when I'm making my tonics. It's a little bit creamier. But that's just a personal preference. So whip that all up together in an immersion blender. You're always going to warm it because milk is easier to digest when it's warm, and the spices that you put into it, like the cinnamon, are more easily delivered to the body with milk. That's because of the fat that milk has and the fact that the body loves fat, high quality fat, and it very much will take the medicine in. So try that sleep tonic recipe. So you've got that sleep tonic recipe, you've got the one I gave you yesterday, and on day 1 you have your juicy joint elixir. So that's 3 formulas right now that you already have midweek. And I hope they help, because it's in the kitchen where a lot of your healing power comes from. That doesn't come from you, right? So check it out, try those practices, and tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to move on in our subject. We're going to move on to your living space and how to go room to room and know what to look for in terms of environmental toxins, and why that false belief of we can't disinfect enough is in fact a false belief, especially amidst the pandemic right now. There's a lot of fear around, disinfecting everything, and a hyper awareness around hygiene, which is certainly a good thing to have, but can also go overboard. So I want to talk about how to look for specific areas in your home that are a cause for inflammation, and ultimately over time autoimmune disease and risk factors for it. So that's tomorrow. Make sure you tune in, and I'll see you then. Bye guys.